Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Dive Cuts. It is Tuesday, October 14th, 2025, and again, we are the only niche podcast that I'm aware of. Maybe there are other people who are doing this just as haphazardly as me, but we are slavishly devoted to Missouri Tigers basketball. I'm Matt Harris. If this is going just a little bit awkwardly, that's okay. I'm just filling in. I'm for the MC who's normally here, Sam Snelling. If you're wondering where that guy is and why his capable hands are not here, well, he is on vacation. He's allowed to apparently leave the St. Louis metro area with his wife, Allie, to celebrate their anniversary. They are in Seattle. I hope at some point they are tasting fine brews in Ballard. I know I told them a good place to go get fresh oysters. That seems like something they should do. And just in general, they should walk around and enjoy the fine Northwest Citadel and all it has to offer. So, if you can't tell, it falls to me to oversee this entire affair. We've got Matt Watkins. He is to my left, probably, hopefully the same way on your screen. We're going to sift through some bits of TID. That includes some preseason forecasts. We're going to talk about some All-SEC team snubs. Matt has been diligently rolling out awesome player previews over at Rock M Plus. We're going to kind of talk about some of his insights from those. And then we'll throw in some recruiting tidbits at the end, mainly how we're waiting on one decision to wrap up the 2026 class. And if you can believe it or not, in about 12 days, we're going to have real basketball. And in 3 weeks, the games start counting. So let's stop joking around. Let's have me quit fumbling this badly. And let's introduce Matt Watkins. Matt, how are you tonight from fine St. Louis?
I'm doing good. It's not quite basketball weather yet here, but hopefully soon enough.
That's what we're all hoping for here. I know things are going well because I went to go just try and find the SEC preseason poll, and we're awash in just all kinds of cut-ups from SEC Media Days, which started today. Missouri had theirs, I think, yesterday for the local writers. They head down. The team heads down to the south. I think they're in Atlanta or Birmingham. I can't remember which one for the conference-wide ones. But people are talking about teams. We're talking about prognostications. You can kind of feel like there's actual tangible information that has to get discussed. For us, we're going to start with the always fun things, something that I think is kind of up our alley, and that is preseason polls. On Sunday, we got kind of our annual gift for those of us who've been paying attention to this stuff for far too long. It's the wonkery that we all love. It's Kim Palm's ratings dropped on Sunday, I believe. Missouri, I don't think, to our surprise, was 28th in those ratings. They were 8th in the SEC pecking order. They are predicted, based on Pomeroy's model, to go 20-11 overall, 9-9 in SEC play, which is pretty much in line with other predictive models at this point. I don't necessarily know that I was completely caught off guard, but Matt, I'll start with you. Were you sort of surprised or not surprised at where Missouri landed in Pomeroy's ratings, which I'm going to pull up now for the video edition that's going to go on YouTube. We are not doing this live. We are recording this, and it will go up in a little bit, but I will put this up, but I'll let you start kind of sharing kind of your thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, I wouldn't, at least as far as Mizzou's concerned, I wasn't really surprised. And I think a big part of that is that perhaps more than any other sport, we are blessed with a number of data forward sites and sources that allow us to do our jobs better. And Ken Pomeroy is obviously the OG of data analytics and college basketball. He was the first one to have a data efficiency website. So his rankings always matter. They're the gold standard, but they're also the last to come out.
Yeah.
Bart Torvik, another good source who also has one of his sources now in the NCAA committee's hands when it comes to selection criteria. He has his rankings up in April, May. So we have a pretty good idea of where Mizzou's going to be. Evan Maya, another good source.
We'll get to him later.
His rankings came out about a month ago. Eric Haslam, a little bit later than the other two, but still before Ken Pomeroy. And they were all in the same area. So to see Mizzou land 28th when I think the others had them mid-20s to mid-30s, it's not a surprise. But, when you look at it from a non-data perspective, I think that's fair. You've done a very good job of tracking all of the human polls and analytic sites and sources, and where they are at 7th or 8th in the conference is about where everyone has them on average.
Yeah.
So, as far as surprises go, no, I would say that's probably the least surprising place they could have been.
The only thing that was moderately surprising, I think, with Ken's rankings, and I have pulled up the Southeastern Conference page here, is Florida 1. Not a shock. They're going to probably be, I think, as close to a consensus as you can get. Kentucky, probably as close to a consensus as you can get here. Tennessee, same thing. This is where the surprises start. And I think, for you and I, it's sort of heartening to see it in this sort of sense, because I think, especially for your model and PAR, which is based off kind of time weighting of BPR, Evan Maya's metric, to see Vanderbilt at 4 there, I think it is really sort of interesting there, especially because I think if you look at Vanderbilt's past couple of years, they're a lot like Missouri in that they've got some dodgy, some poor results in there, some low finishes in the polls that you think would normally act as a drag on their historic sort of like weighted data that goes into these things in the preseason. Vandy's 4th. So I think that was sort of a surprise to see them at that level. I don't think for you and I, it's a shock as much, just given what we know about their returning production and sort of the guys they have back. But to see Pomeroy's model, sort of validate that, in a sense, is nice. The one thing that is surprising is Ole Miss this high. I think, Ole Miss is a team that's probably been sitting, probably closer to 10, 11, 12 in a lot of models at this point. To see them up here is a little bit high, is a little bit of a surprise. Mississippi State, about a couple places higher than I would have thought. To me, the real surprise is to see Arkansas sitting here, particularly if you look at Arkansas's returning production. I think this is one of those things where you sort of get into the discussion about how you value prior season data as a base and as an anchor for you, because Arkansas's past couple of years in the regular season haven't been great. They've been a team that sort of atones in March, and they typically, have overperformed their seed line there. So it's really interesting to see Arkansas sitting there. They've been usually around 5 or 6 in a lot of these models. So I think to see Arkansas sitting behind Missouri at 9 is interesting. I'm not as surprised to see Auburn where they are. I think, once you account for Auburn and the amount of production they've lost, I think that's probably where I would have had them, and at least what I've gone through and done game by game. So I think Pomeroy was different in that there were 3 or 4 teams that were a little higher than normal, and probably 2 or 3 that we see sitting a little bit lower. So I didn't know if any of that, if those sort of outcomes sort of struck you, and sort of if you had any thoughts about sort of why those teams sort of landed where they did.
Yeah, not really. I mean, I guess I'm a little surprised to see Vanderbilt that high, just because prior seasons are weighted in, and Vanderbilt has had some poor results. But, I mean, when you look at them, I believe Vanderbilt's 19th and Auburn is 31st. They're close. Mizzou is 1 spot ahead of Arkansas. They're all in a similar bag together. Toss them in a hat, pick one out. They're close.
Yeah.
And I think that's accurate.
Yeah. I guess the question I have is, you and I have talked a lot about this, and sort of, if you were to strip out Missouri's 0-18 season, the question for us is about what kind of drag that's created. You sort of look at this more. I'm more of a retrospective guy. I tend to look backwards and sort of look at trends. You're actually capable of building forward-looking models and weighting appropriately. So as you've kind of gone through, and even like as you've done PAR, or you've looked at BPR, or even as you just sort of look at how to weight this stuff, to what extent do you think that 0-18 is still acting as an anchor? Is it a severe anchor? Is it a moderate one? I'm just sort of curious here, because I think you and I would look at this and say, if you took that out of there, how many spots higher would Missouri be sitting in some of these models, given what we know about returning production and sort of where they are? So I was just sort of curious, what sort of drag do you think that's creating at this point?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I can't tell because I'm not privy to their exact formulas and inputs and everything, but just based on what I do, again, looking forward, I would say 4 to 5 spots. I don't do my rankings for the entire NCAA, but just looking at it from the SEC perspective, I see Mizzou more as 4th or 5th based on my data. which if you put them fourth or fifth here, they're upper 20s as opposed to lower 20s, but give or take, and there's things to be said about, well, maybe I'm overweighting things and maybe I'm, underweighting negatives. But I think if Mizzou had a 500 record in league play and was like won 16 or 17 games 2 years ago, they would probably be in the high 20s this year.
Yeah. And why that matters is, and I'm working on this right now, is if you were to look at teams that typically have made the Sweet 16 in the last 10 years or so, 80% of them are inside the top 25 in KenPom in the preseason, top 25 or top 30. So we talk about hope. We talk about, every team's aspirations. If you look at the data and you look at, where teams start, where they finish, and what seed they get, and if you just isolate the Sweet 16 teams, it's about 144 teams over the last decade or so. The top 25, top 30 is the cutoff. So if you look at where Missouri is, again, they're 28th. If you were to knock them up 4 to 5 spots, they'd probably be closer to that cutoff. And why I think that matters is that's probably 2 to 3 wins in the SEC's projection, which carries over to seed line. So I think that's the difference here is, if you're adding that 0-18 as sort of a historic weighting data, which will filter out as games come in throughout November and December, but as a starting point, maybe it muddies up a little bit sort of what you might expect from Missouri. And in your ratings, they're 4th or 5th. So I think that's sort of, to me, the question is, and we've talked about this last couple of years, how much have changes in the sport kind of impacted the way predictive metrics model this stuff on the front end and sort of acting as a baseline for us. So again, I don't think we're surprised at where Missouri sits right now. Honestly, I think if you were to say they were 7th or 8th, that's not bad. Which, consequently enough, Matt, we got the SEC poll on Monday. I am surprised. Usually they wait until everybody is gone through the ringer and talked to all the media. It's like the crescendo of media days is to release the poll and the all SEC teams. Well, no, they got that out of the way on Monday. I'm going to share my screen again. This came via email to beat writers. I am unfortunately no longer one, so I have to rely on Eli Hoff, who graciously tweeted this out. I'm going to put it up here on the screen if I can get it right now. Here we go. Missouri, as you'll see in a minute, was picked 7th by the SEC Mediarati. Usually beat writers, sometimes national writers get a vote, but as you can see, not a lot of surprises again here. Florida number 1, Kentucky number 2, Tennessee 3, Alabama 4, Arkansas 5, Auburn 6. That conforms with the broad consensus of metric models, national writers, even bloggers like us. Not a shock. What is kind of a surprise is to see Texas sitting in 9th. They've usually been in 7th. Missouri's been in 8th. Ole Miss is about, again, 4 to 5 spots higher. Respect for Chris Beard, I would suppose. Mississippi State about where you expect. Vanderbilt sitting a couple of spots lower. But to me, this was not a surprise. The top 6 has been pretty, locked in all offseason. The question was whether Missouri was going to be the best of the rest. They are. So I was just going to sort of say, were you surprised at all to see Missouri wind up 7th, or is this just more confirmation of what we've suspected since April, that people didn't really change their opinions over the offseason?
Yeah, I guess I would probably be a little bit more surprised that they were slotted 7th by the humans, simply because I think the data probably supports them being higher than a lot of perception does. What with an 0-19 season under your belt, recency bias with a loss to Drake, a poor end of the season, losing to Princeton year 1 in the tournament. There's a lot of negativity to latch on to, even though it's somewhat undeserved, I think, because Mizzou had good season their first year. They had a good season bordering on great for a large portion of it last year. But there are warts, and without tournament success, without a massive portal haul, without a coaching change, none of that, I thought they would probably be slotted a little bit lower by the humans, but they weren't. So, props to them. I think that 7th is a very fair approximation. I think it's lower than where I'd have them. but I'm driven by my projections as opposed to a sundry of other things, and it's a lot of different opinions go into these polls versus a simple data set. So, them being projected to finish seventh, I think is a little bit of a surprise.
I always sort of tend to view these spots too as a little bit of a hedging of bets, in the 5, 6, 7, and 8 slots, where you could look at Arkansas and say, oh, they bring back, Wagner, they bring back Knox, they bring back some supporting cast, but are the bigs going to be good? What are the freshmen going to do for scoring wise? So we like them. They bring back some production, which is rare for Cal, but we're going to put them fifth until they answer questions. Auburn, they've pretty much turned over almost all their starting five. They have a new coach, but they've got some interesting pieces from the portal. I think a lot of these votes were probably taken before Bruce Pearl retired, so there's probably some assumption of, well, there's a lot of turnover, but they've got, a bucket getter in Kashawn Hall. They got, potential NBA draft pick, and they got some interesting transfers. And we trust Bruce to figure it out, so we'll put him sixth. And if they're a little bit low, we'll just say, well, Bruce didn't quite get the mix right this year. With Missouri, like you said, there's some hedging of bets there. Well, Missouri, as we'll talk about a little bit later, lost quite a bit of shooting. Weren't great defensively down the stretch. Lost to Drake. Are they, can they put together a full season? So we'll slot them seventh. They bring back some interesting pieces. They bring back some good players. We'll put them seventh. So that way, if they overachieve by 2 or 3 slots, we weren't off on them. If they finished 10th, hey, at least we didn't oversell them. So I think that's sort of that weird boundary where everyone's just sort of putting caveats on everybody. And I think the thing that we'll get to now that has us probably more up in arms than anything else is if you look to the right here, if you are watching this on YouTube, if you are listening to us on the left side here of the sheet is the All-SEC teams. Mark Mitchell is there as an All-SEC team second team member. Who is not here, though, Mr. Watkins, that has us so up in arms?
Well, I think the pest extraordinaire, Anthony Robinson, is a notable omission from the list. And, when I look at this list and somewhat even the predicted order of finish, I see beat writers who are probably following football and maybe haven't given a whole lot of thought to and haven't given a whole lot of thought to basketball and haven't really done a lot of research on this. And I don't fault them for that. Anthony Robinson was not a perfect player last year, but my numbers, my work on this, it's hard to see him worse than the 10th best player in the league. And there's 15 listed here. So it's questionable to me to not have him on there, especially when you have guys like Tahad Pettiford, very good player, LeBaron Fillon, very good player. They are similar types of players to Anthony Robinson, very similar players. They're a year younger. They're going to be sophomores this year. Robinson's going to be a junior. But when you look at their numbers, they're very similar. Those guys shot it a little bit more, had a few more possessions than Anthony Robinson did. But there were a lot of mouths to feed offensively on Mizzou's team last year. Perhaps, arguably, too many at times. Yeah. Too many shots that needed to be spread around. So he wasn't always the go-to guy, so to speak. But he was very good when he did shoot the ball. And if he had played 5 more minutes a game and had a little bit higher usage rate, he would have been averaging 12, 13 points a game. And if he was coming back with those numbers, I think he would have been on the list. But it doesn't matter because those things didn't happen. He wasn't asked to do those things. But when he did play, he was very good. So it's like when you're looking at guys who are going to be good next year, I like to look at the guys who were good last year. Anthony Robinson was one of those guys. He was a very good player. And frankly, I think he might have even been snubbed from some postseason honors, even if it was honorable mention a year ago, because I believe the writers did tab him as an all-SEC defensive player. So they obviously think of him as a very good defensive player, which he is, but his offense is quite good too, and it doesn't take a whole lot of looking to see, oh, he's actually pretty good. I mean, he shot 40% from three-point range, had a good assist to turnover ratio. But no.
The first team, I am not surprised to see Alex Condon there. Arguably the best player on the national champs is back. Mm-hmm. That's usually a spot. And Alex Condon is very good. Alex Condon's very good. I should say that that's not just a a lazy pick there. Josh Hubbard, hyper productive, efficient given his volume, deserved to be there. Otega Oweh, I think, is a deserving wing inclusion. If you were just looking at the best returning wing, that's a justifiable selection there. Tahad Pettiford, I think, was good once he settled into his role there, but I think, again, he was sort of in a similar position to Ant, where he was probably a tertiary option. But his inclusion, LeBaron Filon's inclusion, strike me as these guys were borderline NBA draft picks who opted to come back. So if you're a beat writer, you're going to say, well, if NBA scouts were close to taking him in the first round, we'll slot him. That's not a knock on them, but I think if you dig into numbers, there are other compelling cases you could make, like we'll see for Ant here in a minute. Second team, not surprised to see Nate Ament there. He is the number 4 prospect in the country in the 2025 recruiting class. Usually the second team is where we see the best freshmen get slotted. Boogie Fland, this is where I think things start to get interesting. We'll talk about Boogie in a minute. Productive, I think there's some questions about how that productivity comes about. Jacoby Gillespie, I don't mind going here. Jacoby Gillespie was probably arguably second, third best point guard in the Big Ten last year, transferring in. You look at his metrics, that's probably a deserved slot for him. Thomas Houck, maybe at Florida. He played well down the stretch last year. I think that's a case where recency bias probably pushes him up a little bit. Mark Mitchell, second. I think that you and I would agree a second-team slot is good for Mark. He's one of the top 10 players. Closer to that slotting. I think Mark Mitchell on the second team is fine there. Third team always feels weird because I know when I used to do this way back a decade ago, third team to me was an opportunity to put guys in who maybe were overlooked on some teams that are picked lower in the pecking order. And this is where I think everybody's criteria gets a little bit different. Malik Dia, I think, is a really solid player at Ole Miss. He's Ole Miss's best returner. I think if you look at his play type data, there's a compelling case for him being one of the top 15 or 20 returners in the league. Ole Miss is going to need that production. I think you can make a case for him at third team. Aiden Holloway, we'll see in a minute why I think that gets dicey. Carter Knox, again, kind of a recency bias thing, but I think once Carter got full run on the wing, once Boogie Fland was ironically out of the lineup and Arkansas could reconfigure its lineup, Carter played really, really well down the stretch. There's some good stuff in his play type data from those games. I don't mind slotting Carter here. I think he's a really good returner. Jalen Lowe and DJ Wagner, I think, are where things get interesting. And this is where for our people who are, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to stop sharing this screen. I'm going to pull up. It's not a pod unless we have an Excel spreadsheet, Mr. Watkins. So I'm going to share that right now. This is essentially a really quick and dirty stat, breakdown of the ball handlers that are going to be on, that we're going to talk about here. And basically the guys who are in the second and third team. Jalen Lowe is on the third team. He's transferring in from Pitt. He's at Kentucky. He's going to be Kentucky's starting point guard. He averaged 16.8 points, 4.2 rebounds, 5.5 assists, shot the ball at only a 38% clip last year, including just 27% from three. High volume guy at Pitt. They really didn't have a lot of, secondary options. So when I look at Jalen Lowe's numbers, I see a guy who had to carry a crap load of offense, and shooting off the catch is not his thing that he has to do, but he had to do a lot more of it than he was required last year. His assist to turnover rate is actually really, really good. I think his assist rate is 31. His turnover rate is 16.9, so basically 2-1. If you look at his steal and block percentage combined, it's 3.8%, which is really good for a guard. So if the knock on Jalen Lowe is a bit of a chucker, a bit of a volume guy, we can explain that because of the roster he was on. He's not going to have to do that at Kentucky. If you wanted to make a case for Jalen Lowe, I would listen to it as an all-SEC guy coming in. There's some okay stuff there to hang your hat on. Boogie Fland is next here. He averaged 13.5, 3.2, 5.1. Again, poor shooting percentage at 38%. Shot a average clip from three at 34%. To me, Boogie, even if you account for the injury, it's a mixed bag because he's a midi hunter. He loves to hunt pull-ups. He's a bit of a ball stop offensively despite having a 30% assist rate. The stock rate's okay. the question is, do you feel like Fland is a good all-around team player? I think there are good things that he does individually, but I think it's interesting that if you looked at Arkansas's efficiency metrics with him on and off the floor and after he got hurt, they got better when Boogie was out and they could move, Nelly Davis into combo guard. They could play Carter Knox on the wing, and they let DJ run the point. To me, I think if you looked at the on-off splits after he got hurt, set aside the production, did he affect winning basketball? I've got questions about Boogie Fland as an all-SEC guard, but am I being too harsh in my thinking there?
No, I don't think so. We can even set aside the numbers, and what you said there about his on-off is very important. I mean, I remember them coming to Columbia, and that was either the game or a game prior to him getting hurt, and they hadn't won a league game at that point or had one win, something like that. They were not playing well. He gets hurt, they start playing well. It's like, what else do you need to see? I'm a big numbers guy, and the numbers bear it out. They played better without him, but it's just like, I see a better basketball team with him on the bench. And let's go ahead and put him on the all-conference list. It's just, okay. Maybe it'll turn out better this year at Florida. I wouldn't be surprised if it did. He's going to be a sophomore, but it's like, I think Arkansas was better with him on the bench. So, what does that really say about a guy getting slotted on a preseason all-conference team when you think that about someone?
Yeah. Aiden Holloway, I think he was a good specialist for them. I think he was kind of a secondary handler, but did more floor spacing for Alabama last year. Shot the cover off the ball, 41.2% from three. Good, not really an assist setup guy, but I think, the interesting thing when you look at Holloway's numbers is 52% minutes, 20% usage, good O rating because he shot the ball well, but a 15% assist rate, 14% turnover rate, 1.7 stock rate, like, it's almost a profile of a floor spacer, an undersized floor spacer. Uh-huh. And, he's not bad, as you can see down here, that his BPR, is really, really good. His Bayesian performance rating from Evan Maya is second behind Ant. So I think it's interesting that I think you've got to kind of, if I were having to do it, I'd want to take a little bit deeper look at what he does as a team defender. But again, then you're talking about an undersized off-ball floor spacer who's going to have to move into an on-ball role this year at Alabama. I get why he's slotted there, but I don't know. I think if you're going to put a wing there with Carter Knox, I would have taken Aiden off there because he's not really a true combo guard. But again, that's because I actually believe these teams should resemble real basketball teams. DJ Wagner is on our list at 11 points, 2.7 rebounds, 3.6 assists, 40% field goal percentage, 30% from three-point range. DJ played a lot of minutes last year. He played nearly 86% of minutes, but usage rate, 20%. That's basically almost close to a role player. A 98 offensive rating, which is below average, 18% assist rate, 18% turnover rate, 1.8 stock percentage. I'm glad DJ's still around, that Cal's kept him, but there's not really a lot of compelling data here for me that he's going to be a guy who's going to be an all-conference level guy, because you know what else happened? Cal brought in 2 5-star freshman ball handlers who both love hunting jumpers and love playing with the ball in their hands. If you look at roster construction and you look at what DJ did last year on a team with kind of similar results, I don't see it. I just don't see.
I'd have taken one of the freshmen over him. One of Arkansas's freshmen. It just, he's fine.
He's fine. Now we come to
he's
Ant.
Not bad. He's just all conference.
He's fine. He's a veteran guy, and we needed to have another Arkansas guy there.
It's like putting Aiden Shaw on a preseason list. I mean, he's a fine player, but and I like Aiden Shaw. Don't get me wrong, but it's like no one would confuse him for a preseason all conference player.
No,
when he's a good player, but we're talking great players here. And I did see Aiden Shaw on the court last night for Boston College, so shout out to the Shaws. Good luck this year. We're rooting for you. But
enjoy Harvard Square, guys. Enjoy it.
I don't I don't see it with DJ Wagner. Now, maybe he makes a big jump this year. I will allow for that, but they're the preseason voters are
where
not
the touch is going to be for him.
Right.
Where the touch is going to be for that jump.
When I look at the rest of this list, they are not projecting guys to what they can be this year, because if they were, Anthony Robinson.
And this is where I think Ant gets hurt, because you talked about it before. 9 points per game, 3.1 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 48% field goal percentage, 40% from three. And this is where Ant kind of, I think, runs into trouble. He only played 55% of minutes last year, 56% of minutes if you're rounding up. 21.4% of possessions is solid, but it's rotational player usage. The offensive rating is really good at 120.3. The assist rate is solid at 25.6. You can ding him for the turnover rate, which is near 20. But then the thing that I think a lot of people that will hang our hat on is he was second in steals in the SEC last year, and he has a 6.0 steal plus block percentage. That's absurd for a 6'3" guard. Mm-hmm. He had the number 7 steal rate in the country. He grades out phenomenally if you look at Synergy's, data on defense, which you always have to take a grain of salt with. And then if you look at Bayesian performance rating, which is Evan Maya's way of kind of like doing a holistic player rating, he's 7 or almost 8 times better than your replacement level college player if you base it on BPR. And a lot of that's because of his defensive value. And this is where I think things get tricky, is how do you quantify defensive impact? I didn't have a chance or to prep to go look at on-off splits, but just watching Ant, looking at his base metrics, the argument for Ant Robinson is that he's arguably the best on-ball defender in this conference. He shoots the ball well
possibly
off
the country.
Possibly the country. So if you've got the best on-ball defender in the country, not on your all-SEC list, that's an oversight, a glaring oversight.
And a guy with a 120 offensive rating. I mean, he's not just a defensive guy. We're not talking DJ Wagner's offensive numbers here. He had good offensive numbers.
The thing that hurts Ant is he's going to commit at least 2 fouls a game that you can foresee coming. What's the first one? A hand check 75 feet from the rim. And then what's the second one? He's going to come back and hack someone.
he's gonna bowl through someone's chest at some point.
At some point. I would add that you can also count one. He's gonna miss on turning a dribbler, get annoyed, come back, and try and poke the ball away from behind and get caught. At least one of those offenses will prompt Dennis Gates to call him over, put his arm around his shoulder, and say, "Ant, we need to discuss the decision you just made." And he has a tendency to pick up 2 fouls early, sit for stretches, take himself out of the game. If Ant played 75% of minutes and had the usage rate you're talking about, he probably averages 12 to 13 a game?
At least, yeah.
And we aren't talking about this. So part of this is oversight on writers and folks not doing a deep sift on Ant and really understanding his defensive value. But part of it's also on Ant for decision-making and prudence. And you hope that's what he learns, and he has to learn it this year for this team to do what we think it's capable of doing and finishing a couple of spots higher. But I think
allow me to retort, Matt.
Go ahead.
Talking about decision-making, when I sift through the field goal percentages of these players, 37, 40%. If we want to talk about decision-making, let's talk about these terrible shots that they're taking.
The best part is Ant's field goal percentage improved once he started taking pull-ups. Once they said, "Hey, Ant, we finally figured out that you attacking the rim out of ball screens, that's not as good as you just playing in one dribble pull-ups. Do that." Which I think is another thing that enhances value. How many guys are elite pull-up shooters in the mid-range? That's a unique skill set to have. He shoots the ball well off the catch. Again, this is not to say any of these guys are awful. They're all solid players. I think, though, that if you really look at guys like Boogie Fland, if you look at guys like Aiden Holloway or DJ Wagner, there are contextual cases to make that Ant should be there. They should be off the list. We'll see. Ant's going to have plenty of motivation now come this season to make writers regret these votes. But I thought that was just sort of interesting to sort of look at here, because I think you really have to, it gets at, I think, the big process that we've sort of hinted around here of how do you assess players before the season? What process do you use? What criteria do you use? And, we'll see. I think they got it right with Mark. They got it wrong with Ant. But the nice thing is we've got 3 or 4 months to figure out who winds up on the right side of this argument. So we'll see. The other thing that I wanted to get to as we sort of move through this thing, try and move through this thing as quickly as I can, is if you want to learn more about Ant's game, as Matt's talked about, you can do that over at Rockin' Plus. You can learn about a lot of players' games because over the past week, Mr. Watkins has been stellar debuting what I would say it was his summer project. His summer project of essentially over the past couple of years, we've done written player previews, which have combined text, charts, and video. Well, this year, Mr. Watkins said, I don't need Harris involved in any of this. I'm going to curate my own cut-up lists and walk you through every player on the roster, what they do well, what they struggle with, and what I think they have to do this year. They're awesome, and they are also free. If you come over to Rockin' Plus, click on them, watch them. They're on YouTube. They're fantastic. You will learn a ton. I only got through the Jacob Cruz one, and I feel better now as a result of it. It's just fantastic stuff that I think if you really, really want to have an interactive way of understanding how we watch film and how we assess things, it's also a great resource. But I think the one thing that I would sort of want to pick your brain about as you sort of get a chance to promote these is we've talked all off season about, we know that Mark and Ant are going to be the figureheads, but it's really what's Mizzou going to do to fill in behind them. And I think we've talked a lot about Sebastian Mack. Obviously, he's the highlight transfer for that. He's going to come in and probably be the secondary ball handler alongside Ant. And then we talked about, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the supply of shooting. And there are 2 guys that I think are going to be relied on to do that, probably, among a slew of guys, Trent Pierce and Jacob Cruz. So I wanted to just take a couple of minutes to kind of cede the floor to you and kind of talk about how you went through evaluating those guys. And I figured we'd start with Sebastian Mack. I've written about him in the offseason as being, he's just a paint touch king. That guy wants to get downhill. He wants to attack. He's at times almost plays with blinders on. But the question that I think you and I have asked, and that I even wrote about this summer a little bit, was how much does he have to shoot the ball to, one, make defenses respect him off the drive, but also, two, just to help with the team's supply of shooting. But I figured I would start out by saying, when you sat down and you came to Seb, fresh, and you were getting ready to do his preview, what were the big guiding questions that you think, you needed to address or thought people needed to know about Seb as he gets ready to go into his first season with Mizzou?
Well, I would assume that most of the Mizzou basketball fans are also Mizzou football fans. If I had a comparison for Sebastian Mack, it would be Ahmad Hardy. When you watch him play basketball, he plays like a running back. There's no real mystery to his game. His game is to get the ball in his hands, go to the rim. And he's going to go through contact. There's going to be bumps, there's going to be bruises, but he's getting to the rim and he's getting to the line. That's what he does. And he's done that for a team that is rugged, to use a judicious term.
It's kind.
For UCLA, Mick Cronin, it is not a work of art what they do. And he was pretty productive there. He didn't shoot the ball real well outside, but one thing I get into in the preview, it's not so much shot selection with Mr. Mack, which a lot of these players, it is shot selection, but with him, it's not so much. He's never really been worked with on his shooting form, and that's not surprising. Mick Cronin is not an offensive coach. Yes, he's put guys in the NBA, but he did not fix Sebastian Mack's shooting form. And it's mind-boggling to think of a good player like Mack who made it 2 years making the same mistake over and over again as a jump shooter. I shouldn't say over and over again. About 50% of the time he was making this mistake. But it's something I can guarantee you that the staff is working on with him, because this staff, although they have faults, shooting and teaching players how to shoot and shoot to the best of their ability is not one of them. And what I'm talking about is his feet. And
Yeah.
if you watch my player preview, we will discuss at length what is wrong with Sebastian Mack's feet when he's shooting jump shots. It's guaranteed that if you watch his feet and you listen to what I say, the film will prove it to be true, that you can tell if he makes or misses the shot by where his feet are.
It's one of those things. I think that's, I've spent the summer also kind of going through and looking at just reading entirely too many academic pieces about the kind of kinematics of jump shooting. And really, it all starts at the base. Are you stable off the base? Is your foot position consistent? And are you getting good energy transfer upward? And it's true. If you watch Seb shoot, when the lower half is quiet, the results are dramatically better. And that's something that you coach, is how to come off movement or how to come off relocation and get your base established. We spend so much time talking about hand position, release point. Every good jumper starts from good, and not even and there's the old axiom of square to the rim. You don't have to square to the rim. You just have to get a good, stable base that lets you elevate straight and keep your body elevated and erect through the shot. When Seb does that, the rest of the shot looks fantastic. I think his hand position, the way his elbow position is, everything else looks good from about the shoulder up, from about the shot pocket up. But it's how he transitions into that that's interesting. So watch that to see kind of how Matt breaks that down. Similarly, I think it's interesting, when we talk about Trent Pierce, because Trent Pierce, I don't think any of us would question his shooting mechanics. He doesn't explode into his jumper, but
except his free throws. But that's another conversation.
That's another. But it can be the same conversation, because when I watch Trent, he's not an explosive shooter vertically, but big guys don't need to be. But it's smooth, it's repeatable. How much, did you go in with Trent and just sort of trying to assess as much as you can on video confidence? Because I think that's something we've talked about a lot. Is that a focal point?
It's all about confidence and aggressiveness, aggression. He put out arguably 2 or 3 of the biggest highlight plays of the year last year at the rim. And they had some pretty athletic dudes last year, but Trent Pierce can be that guy. It's just so often it's his passivity that is just, it's aggravating, because he has it, but you have to have it, at the same time. It's you can have all of these tools, which he has, and have aggression, which he has sometimes, but then if you don't have the switch on, it looks really bad. And that's what he's got to work on, whether it's confidence, whether it's aggression. I'm not sure which of those two it is, but they work part and parcel. And however you can get those switches to flip at the same time in the same direction, that's the key with Trent.
I think it'll be interesting to see what happens now that CY is gone. Because CY was a guy who was in his ear constantly about that, constantly trying to draw that out of him. And if you went to practice and got a chance to watch it, that was something that he was almost CY's special project. Well, that guy's in South Florida now, and Trent's a junior. And, I think the one thing that'll be interesting is how much can that be internally motivated now for him? Because there's an opportunity here for him. The wing rotation, not quite settled right now. I know we want to see Honor Batang break out, but there's some opportunities on that wing if he can step forward. Mark's probably ensconced at the 4, but you want to be that backup guy at the 4, it's there. There's a role there to probably be 4th, 5th in the rotation at this point.
So. That's where I had him, yeah.
And that's what you want to see. He's got all the tools. He's got all the physical abilities. Can he put it all together this year? Because if he can, I think he elevates that roster, and he gives them a really unique jumbo wing that few teams in the SEC have. Similarly, I think the last guy we'll talk about is Jacob Cruz, who we think caught more flack than was necessary for long stretches last year, but quietly put together a really nice end of the season offensively. And so I was just sort of curious, as you watched back over Jacob's film, just what stood out to you about maybe the before and after, as you watched him down the stretch, and just in general, what do you think emerged with him over the course of a year? How did
Well,
his
I
sort
will
of
say during
acclimation
the
go?
preview, I dropped the term primacy bias, which I think was at play with Jacob Cruz. He came in as a 40+% three-point shooter the year before, got off to a slow start. People are like, this guy sucks. He can't make a shot, which was true. He could make a shot. But when you're a shooter, that's all you get to do. That's where your value is as a shooter. It's like being a relief pitcher. If you come in to get 3 outs and you give up 2 hits in a row, you suck. That's the same deal as it is as being a three-point shooter. But as the year went along, he got better. And I believe he was shooting something like high 30s, 40% the last 10, 12 games of the season.
On good volume, too, about 3 or 4 per game.
Pretty decent volume, yeah. So I think with him, unlike Sebastian Mack, it's more of a matter of shot selection. And I walk through that in pretty great detail about what type of shots he needs to be taking. And frankly, the shots he's good at are probably going to be the ones that are available there this year. Last year, I think he was a victim a bit of being Jacob Cruz, Caleb Grill's understudy in the offense. And Caleb Grill is an elite shooter off of movement, or at least he was last year. So they had him running off of all manner of screens. I mean, the guy was running a marathon every time down on offense, just going all over the place trying to get open. And if he got it, he'd shoot it. Jacob Cruz isn't that good at that. And yet that's the position he'd come in and play, and a lot of those same plays were run for him. That's not really how he shoots the ball that well. He's 6'8". He can shoot over most guys. Let him spot up, and he's really good. Just camp him out on a wing or a corner, pass him the ball when the defense sags in, he's going to make it. And that's what I think he needs to focus in on this year, as well as the team, knowing that that's where his strengths are.
Less zipper action. And I'd like to see him use him more as a screener and pick and pop stuff. When he was at UT Martin, he was really good. I think he's good about those first 2 steps, getting on balance, getting square, and getting a shot off there. But it was weird. But I do agree, seeing him come off floppy, seeing him come off zipper, those are just things where your lower half coordination has to be so good. And I think people undersold, Caleb Grill's high jump experience. He had fantastic ability, to understand spatial awareness when aloft. His balance and his ability, his internal gimbal, I think I called it once, when he got airborne was fantastic. Some guys have that and some guys don't. And, that's, I think if Cruz was coming off flare screens or if he's coming off pick and pops, he's pretty good because you're going to a spot, you're drifting, but you're still kind of square to the target and you can shoot it a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see if the scheme shifts to, like you're saying, to accentuate those. But the reason I was asking about those 3 too is I think what has struck me as I've gone through the summer is every preview I read or any kind of look ahead, it sort of raises this point. Mizzou's losing Tamar Bates and Caleb Grill. That's a lot of shooting they're losing. I don't know how they're going to account for that. I mean, they don't really have a lot of shooting on the roster. What are they going to do? How are they going to make that up? How are they going to backfill it? And I think it even got us a little bit in spring because we were looking at guys in the portal going, well, this guy shoots it pretty well on volume, and this guy is, a guy they could plug in. I think we spent a lot of time looking at Rylan Griffin for just that reason. But then I think it hit me as I was going through and I was doing kind of the, swing skill reviews this summer. It's probably just KISS method. This team's really good at doing what Sebastian Mack wants to do, which is attacking gaps, slashing, applying rim pressure, taking contact, and playing downhill. And if that's what the strength of your roster is, you just need enough functional shooting to keep defenses from shrinking the floor. And if you look, and I think you documented this a couple of times in threads over at Rockin' Plus, which are very handy. If you look at the kinds of shots that are either like spacing off to the weak side, drifting to the slot, the kinds of shots that happen when you need to create that gap space or keep double gaps open, this team's good at shooting those shots. They've got that kind of shooting and at the right kind of volume. So I may have tipped my hand on this, but is there enough shooting on this roster for what the strength of this team is probably going to be?
I mean, the answer is no, there's never enough shooting, but practically speaking, I think for college basketball, yes, there probably is. I may eat those words later, but, if there's one thing I've come to trust Dennis Gates with, and there are many, but if there's one thing, it's that if a guy can shoot, he's going to shoot a little bit better than he has for Dennis Gates. That bears out every year. Just every year, guys come in, and maybe not one guy, Okay. I won't say every single guy, but the team cumulatively shoots better than they did on their career prior. And that's just the way it works. And if that happens again, I mean, this team, if you break it down into shooting open shots versus contested shots, this team makes a lot of open shots. And if you have what we think they have with Mark Mitchell, Sebastian Mack, Anthony Robinson, all being able to attack the paint, you're going to have open shots or you're going to have open rim attempts. Okay? And we have a lot of guys, and by we, I say Mizzou, we have a lot of guys on this roster that can make open shots. And I think that's the big thing. You don't need guys to be doing what Caleb Grill was doing last year because that's not the offense they're going to be running. They ran that offense because Caleb Grill was a flamethrower for 12, 15 games. And then he wasn't. And then they struggled. That's not what they're going to do this year. I think the offense is going to look a lot more like it did when Caleb Grill was out. And that involved a win against Kansas. That involved probably should have beating Illinois. I was there in the stands. They lost. And credit to Illinois for making every damn free throw that they've ever taken in their lives that day. Mizzou just didn't make a few plays down the stretch, but they played an offense that basically didn't shoot threes.
Yeah.
And they played it really well. And they have a lot of those guys. Like they don't have Tony Perkins this year. Well, they replaced him with a guy who's arguably better at getting to the rim.
Yeah.
Tamar Bates had a huge game against Kansas. It was all right against Illinois. You don't have that, but you have a better Anthony Robinson this year. You have a Javon Porter instead of Josh Gray. You have more offense in your 5 spot than you did a year ago. So, I think they're going to be okay. I may regret saying that, but I don't think they would be okay with what we may have initially thought that they would have this year if we just look at everyone's career percentages. But I think where it will ultimately end up, they will be okay.
The one thing I'd say is if somebody goes to Rockin' Plus and looks up Caleb Grill stuff, they changed the offense, clearly. They put in more zipper action. They put in more floppy action. They built in more flare screen stuff for him as a screener. They made mid-season changes to accentuate that heater for him. And I think a lot of people, about the time they tuned in and clued into Missouri being very good, just assumed, this is what Missouri has done all year. I think writers and national folks who sort of tuned in said, this is just what Missouri does night in and night out. They hadn't done that for the first 14, 15, 16 games of the season. And then, Caleb sort of hit a slump over the last 5 to 6 games. And, as we've written about and talked about, I think by then the offense had contorted itself to so harsh of a degree that they couldn't really revert back easily. But that was not how Missouri started the year. I think when I wrote midway through last year, the big deal was that they were like changing the kind of screens they were running in their base offense. But they were still running modified Princeton sets and then 5 out with high pick and rolls. It wasn't until Caleb caught, really on after that game against Kansas and came back that they changed things up. So I think you kind of have to set aside that version of Missouri, like you were saying. And the last thing I will say on this is, again, go to Rockin' Plus. Go look at the previews. They're free. They're fantastic. They are one of the main reasons why we love having the video technology we do is we can finally let you into our broken minds and see what we see when we watch basketball games. You'll come away better for it, and I think you'll understand way more context and nuance around how these guys play. And it really does matter once the season gets started to have those sort of visual references in your head, because over time it does add up and you begin to notice these trends, notice these tendencies they have, and it makes watching the game way more enjoyable because you can start to see kind of how guys get to their spots, the kind of actions they like, the kind of touches they like. It just makes your ability to watch a game, I think, with a little bit, hopefully slightly lower pulse rate, feasible. So get on over to Rockin' Plus, check those out. Matt's put in a ton of great work on them. Big shout out to Levi Hutmacher, too, who produces our podcasts, but has also helped get those ready for public consumption. So please, again, check them out. That's all I got right now for current team news. The last thing I'll do before we get out of here is we still have some recruiting, Matt. There's still some 2026 recruiting matters to be taken care of. Namely one, waiting for Tristan Reed to decide on his college destination. Reed took a visit a couple weeks ago to Maryland. He is the number 80 prospect in the country, a 6'9" post player. He dropped his top 5 this week which coincidentally enough is the same list of schools that he took official visits to, which is Missouri, Maryland, Mississippi State, Ohio State, and Michigan State. We're waiting to see where he's going to go. It's gone kind of dark there. I think there's confidence on Mizzou side about where they stand, but it looks like Michigan State may be filling its slot that he would normally take. It doesn't look like Maryland or Mississippi State might be the destination. So that leaves it as a potential 3-team bake-off with Missouri, Ohio State, maybe Maryland if they get into that, if they need a big, but we'll wait and see. Once Reed decides that will be it, it'll be curtains for the 2026 class. Assuming Reed picks Mizzou, that'll be a top 10 class that they will sign. And then we'll turn our attention to 2027. And I'm already... But
wait, there will be portal in between.
Hopefully not a lot of portal in between. If you believe Dennis Gates, what he said on Monday, which made us very happy, you don't build championship rosters through the portal. You build them through recruiting, retention, developing a core, and second-year gains. It was basically catnip for anybody on this podcast. So Dennis Gates, hopefully, will just be shopping for role players in the portal. Just some specialists, a couple specialists or two in the portal. Maybe a big shooter to come in and help out Honor Batang and Aiden Chronister. Hopefully it won't be too big of a portal overhaul this spring. But Watkins, is there anything I omitted? Anything I failed to bring up in what is probably one of the longer podcasts you and I have done together?
No, I don't think so. Mizzou plays next Friday. K-State, 9 o'clock at home.
$10 tickets. $10 tickets. Buy them. Show up. Hopefully they'll beat the crap out of Jerome Tang's crew, which I think probably paid more for its roster than Missouri did. But
second year in a row that they meet P.J. Haggerty in the first televised game.
Hopefully,
how about that for news?
I mean, hopefully PJ has a worse outing than he did last year against them. Hopefully things go better for Mizzou in that matchup. But that's all I got here. I think Sam is going to be back next week with a pre-recorded guest, and then we'll be back into Blake Level to wrap up the month to do our big SEC preview where we run through every team. Until then, make sure you come over to Rock M Plus, sign up. It's $5 a month. You get access to all our fun nutty wonkery stuff. You get access to the boards where you can come ask us questions, tell us we're dumb. It's all there for you, really, for a nominal fee. Make sure you're also going to Rock M Nation every day and checking out content as it goes up there. You can follow us on Twitter or on the social medias. I'm at Matt J. Harris 85. Watkins is at Data Mizzou. I don't know what other plugs I have. I'm sure Sam will text me later saying I omitted something critical. But otherwise, thanks for joining us. We're glad you're here. Hope you enjoyed our catch-up this week, and we will talk to you all later. Watkins, anything again you want to add before you get out of here?
Nope, Watkins out.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and we are going to talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. Rock M Radio is the official podcast network of Rock M Plus, a new and exciting subscription service provided by me and the other voices of Rock M Radio. Please take a few moments to head over to rockm.plus and sign up for an account today. The cost is only $5 a month, and benefits include access to our live podcast, a subscriber-only message board, weekly newsletters, and more. If you enjoyed this episode of Rock M Radio and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, make sure to click the subscribe button below and tell your friends. Our podcast feed is available through the Apple Podcast app for iPhone, Google Podcast app for Android, whatever app you listen to your podcast. You can also find Rock M Radio on Spotify. If you're looking for a podcast about your favorite team that is not the Missouri Tigers, Fan First Sports Network is your answer. A full podcast network loaded with the team-specific podcasts covering Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, and more. And we'll be back with more episodes of Rock M Radio coming to you soon.